We will have that live, of course, and work on that is expected to continue through tomorrow. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, senators off today and tomorrow for their annual party retreats, and when they return on Thursday, senators will continue work on reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, and you can follow the Senate on C-SPAN 2 when they return. Now live to the House floor here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Loving God, you are compassionate and merciful. We give you thanks for giving us another day. During these days, when the House itself continues to organize itself for the 113th Congress, we ask your blessing upon the members of this assembly. There are many issues which press upon our nation now, and more lie upon the legislative horizon. Pour forth an abundance of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding upon the members of Congress and upon your people, so that together solutions for the betterment of our nation might be forged. Bless us this day and every day. May all that is done be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, it has been more than 4 years since the White House operated under a budget. It's not a coincidence that each of these 4 years has brought a $1 trillion deficit. Tennesseans are frustrated over the fact that they must stick to a budget in operating their homes and businesses, yet the Obama administration cannot seem to do the same in running the country with our hard-earned tax dollars. Last Congress, House Republicans passed 2 responsible budgets while the administration and their allies in the Democratic-controlled Senate twiddled their thumbs. In an effort to finally get this administration to act, Republicans have introduced the Require a Plan Act. This common-sense proposal will mandate the White House produce a balanced budget within a 10-year window or submit a plan explaining in what year the budget would balance. Unfortunately, it seems that we have no other choice but to force this administration to finally address the debt crisis that is destroying jobs and mortgaging the future of our children and grandchildren. I yield back.
The gentleman from Tennessee yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise the Senate.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA. After years of hearing talk about family values, it took President Clinton and the 103rd Congress to adopt policies like FMLA that actually value families. As many people know, FMLA allows up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave per year due to an employee's own illness, to take care of a sick family member, or to be with a new child. For 20 years, this law has recognized the needs of hardworking families, particularly working women, who often are heroically trying to balance their job and their role as primary caregiver. The latest data from the Department of Labor demonstrate the importance of FMLA. In 2011, over 14 million workers took leave under the Act, and this leave is not disruptive to employers, with 40% of workers being away from the job for 10 days or fewer. I know workers around the country are grateful for the protections of FMLA. Now, for 20 years, they have felt confident they could take time off as needed without fear of losing their job to care for themselves or their family. As we debate the fiscal and budgetary issues of the day, I hope FMLA serves as a reminder that we can and should be valuing families, not just in our words, but in our deeds as well. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, on December 8, 2012, Got Robot, pull up their uniform here, FTC team number 5037, a group of high school students from Elgin, Illinois, won an award at the first Tech Challenge Illinois State Tournament. Now Got Robot will represent Illinois in the first World Championships in St. Louis, Missouri this upcoming April. Out of 2,500 participating teams around the world, Got Robot is one of only 128 to qualify for the World Championships. At a time when we need to do everything we can, everything possible to promote science education and basic scientific research, I'm so thrilled to be able to say that I've met this team, seen the robot, and it's fantastic. We are so proud of these students, and we wish their team the best of luck. So go Got Robot. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman from Illinois yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 52, resolved that the following named members be and are hereby elected to the following standing committee of the House of Representatives. 1. Committee on House Administration, Ms. Lofgren and Mr. Vargas.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, today we will consider a House Republican message bill that makes a point about spending and budget deficits. The problem is all those who support this bill about spending did all the spending. 2 tax cuts that gave us the worst period of job growth in the past 75 years and our nation's worst recession. 2 wars unpaid for that took $1.2 trillion out of the American economy. A drug prescription program unpaid for cost $1 trillion over 10 years. The big spenders, who falsely claim to be concerned about the job creators, are in fact the debt and deficit makers. I yield back the balance of my time.
Back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise? No objection.
Mr. Speaker, last week unemployment rose to 7.9% and consumer confidence in the economy fell to a 14-month low. During the last 3 months of 2012, the economy shrank for the first time since the depths of the Great Recession. All of these indicators confirm what the American people know all so well, that the economy is still suffering. And yet the President began New Year's by raising taxes on hardworking Americans and by closing down his Jobs Council, confirming another thing that Americans know all too well as well, that Washington truly is disconnected from the struggles of hardworking families who pay their taxes, work hard, and are struggling just to survive. Now the President is calling for even more revenues to pay for $4 trillion in new debt that he has helped heap on the backs of hardworking Americans during the past 4 years. More and more of my constituents in South Alabama tell me they don't want to charge more money in their names as taxes rise and red ink pours through the streets of Washington, D.C. While the House has passed responsible budgets for the last 2 years, it's time for the President and the Democrat Senate to do the same. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
The House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
No objection.
The AARP, the American Medical Association, the Episcopal Church, the Catholic Conference, the Conference of Mayors, Bob Barker, Oprah Winfrey, Tony Bennett, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Sara Lee Corporation, and hundreds of other individuals and organizations all have something in common. They're all targeted on NRA's website as holding anti-gun positions. And what does the NRA consider to be anti-gun? For one, they say that the listed individuals and groups are opposed to repeal of the Brady Act. It's not that they support expanding background checks to include all gun sales, which would seem to be reasonable. It's that they're opposed to the repeal of the current Brady Act, which would end all background checks. With over 30,000 Americans killed every year by guns, it seems that this is the time for swift and focused action to mitigate our nation's gun violence epidemic. It's not time to be drawing up an enemies list of those who support reasonable gun safety measures. I'd suggest to some of my colleagues in the House, with enemies like these, perhaps it's time to rethink who your friends are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman, for what reason does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
Speaker, seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revising some of my remarks.
No objection. The gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to praise the life and legacy of a personal hero of mine. Adele Hall was one of the kindest, warmest, friendliest people I have ever known. Yesterday, Adele was laid to rest amongst the outpouring of family and friends who were touched and inspired by the heartwarming and graceful life that Adele led. Called the First Lady of Kansas City, Adele and her adoring husband Don have been staples of the Kansas City community for a generation, providing irreplaceable leadership in both business and civic affairs. Her obituary states in part, Adele was interested in a broad range of community needs with a special passion for needs of children. She was a tireless working toward those interests in any capacity needed as a visionary board chairman, energetic champion and catalyst for change, hardworking committee member, dedicated fundraiser, or hands-on volunteer. We will forever miss Adele's good deeds in our community, but most of all, I will miss her smile. To Adele Hall, thank you for your life of inspirational leadership. You have forever found a place in our hearts. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what reason does the gentleman from Oregon rise? No objection. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
So in the middle of a busy legislative week, the Republicans are going to bring up a bill to require the President to submit a balanced budget. It would be good if first perhaps they looked in the mirror, because this comes from the same House Republicans who in the last Congress passed the Ryan budget, which got great accolades from the right. Unfortunately, the Ryan budget, even with directed scoring, that is, made-up numbers that pretend if you cut taxes you'll increase revenues, wouldn't pretend to balance the budget till 2040. And that was after it did away with Medicare, student financial aid, and a few other domestic programs. Now let's get real around here. 1/3 of the deficit is due to high unemployment. We need a strategy to put Americans back to work. That requires investment. Investment in education, investment in our roads, bridges, highways, transit systems, jetties, levees, dams, harbors across the country. That would put Americans back to work. That would get this country moving again, not a bunch of fake bills about a budget that they have no intention of balancing.
The gentleman yields back. For purposes, the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition. Without objection, the gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The victims of the recent tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, and the victims of other recent shootings deserve our solemn prayers for their loss and our deepest sympathy for their pain. As a nation, we should focus our collective grief and attention on finding actual solutions to prevent such tragedies in the future, but gun bans are not the answer. History shows that gun bans only keep guns away from law-abiding citizens, not criminals. Blaming a gun for violence is like blaming a pen for a misspelled word. Mr. Speaker, this week President Obama hosted his latest in an unfortunate series of anti-gun pep rallies. This nation does not need more political posturing. Instead, we need a serious discussion about how we address mental health as a nation, and we need to take action to better protect our children in their schools. I stand ready to protect the Second Amendment rights of our citizens and work with anyone who will support policies that could actually stop future violence. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Indiana yields back. For what purpose, the gentleman from Vermont seek recognition. Without objection, gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise to honor a person whose time was short but whose contribution was great. Joan Mulhern passed away this past December at the age of 51. Joan graduated from the University of Vermont, and she very quickly made a name for herself as a fierce and extremely effective advocate for the environment in her position with the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. Although Joan then left Vermont to pursue a law degree here in Washington, D.C., and later went on to a very successful and effective career at Earth Justice, Vermont never left Joan. The values with which she pursued her passion for a clean environment, for a sustainable environment were ones Vermonters know well. She was relentless, she was tenacious, she was tireless, and she was kind, and she was very effective. As Joan friends have noted, she would have been uncomfortable with all the tributes that have been paid to her, but she'll have to give us a pass on this one because she certainly lived a life worthy of praise and honor. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purposes, the gentlelady from Missouri seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, every day, hard-working families and small business owners from the 2nd District of Missouri create budgets, set priorities, and live within their means. Yet President Obama and the Senate Democrats keep writing blank checks on the backs of our children and our grandchildren. Yesterday marked the 4th time in the last 5 years that President Obama has missed his deadline to submit a budget on time to the American people. And the Democrat-led Senate has only exacerbated the debt crisis by not passing a budget in almost 4 years. This is simply unacceptable, and House Republicans stand prepared to address this crisis and offer a responsible budget again this year. American families deserve better than missed deadlines, more spending, and more debt. They deserve answers and accountability. This week, the House will vote to require the President to show a plan of exactly when and how he would balance the federal budget. The 113th Congress was elected to tackle the big problems, and there is no greater problem facing our nation right now than our out-of-control spending and debt. I yield back.
The lady's time's expired. For what purposes, the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition.
Address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman seek unanimous consent without objection.
Thank you. Memphis, Tennessee has an iconic restaurant worldwide known, the Rendezvous. And it's iconic because it's got great ribs, many artifacts about the Mid-South, but also a great wait staff that makes everybody feel at home. One of those iconic waiters, Jack Dyson, will be retiring after 45 years. Jack's 78 years old, and he'll retire this week after serving millions of customers, from presidents and first ladies to the Rolling Stones to Bill Cosby, and to regular people that come in and are made to feel at home when they come to the Rendezvous for that world-class fare. Jack Dyson has made me feel at home. He's a part of the Rendezvous. When he retires, part of the Rendezvous will go with him. I thank Jack for his service to his country as a Korean War veteran and to his service to the world at the world-famous Rendezvous. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For purposes, the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition. Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the outstanding efforts of an organization in my district in Pennsylvania, Buck's Promise for Youth and Communities. This group is being honored tomorrow, February 7th, by the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, which is the nation's leading substance abuse prevention organization, representing over 5,000 community anti-drug coalitions across the country. Buck's Promise for Youth and Communities will be receiving the Dose of Prevention Award, an esteemed award which acknowledges community-based organizations that have taken the initiative to raise awareness of the dangers of prescription drug abuse and over-the-counter cough medicine abuse. Buck's Promise for Youth and Communities consists of individuals who truly exemplify leadership and ingenuity. They made tremendous strides in educating my district on the dangers of medicine abuse through take-back events and town hall-style community discussions. I congratulate them and applaud their continuous efforts to bring this crucial issue to the forefront of our community. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, the gentleman from California seek recognition.
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to advise me to extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, later this week, the United States Senate will pick up where Congress left off in passing the Violence Against Women's Act. As a co-chair of the Victims' Rights Caucus, every day victims' advocates do the hard work of making sure their voices are heard for the assistance of the programs authorized under the Violence Against Women's Act. Last year alone, the Marjorie Mason Center of Fresno, which I have worked with over the years, and the Valley Crisis Center in Merced provided emergency housing for over 1,100 women and children in their time of need. We have learned a lot from victims' rights advocates and law enforcement since the law was enacted in 1994. It's time we use those lessons to put the safety of all crime victims first and stop playing politics. Now the House must follow the Senate's lead by quickly adopting this measure to show that protecting victims is a top priority of this Congress. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For purposes, the gentlelady from California seek recognition. Without objection, gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to commemorate the anniversary of the Family and Medical Leave Act, a critical law that has helped Americans balance the demands of work and family for 20 years. Over these last 2 decades, FMLA has helped to foster strong family relationships, ensuring parents could take time with a new child, allowing workers to care for older family members, and permitting military families the time to prepare for new deployments. For this, we are all grateful. But we must remember that FMLA is only the first step to helping our working families. Too many are still without FMLA's protections, and millions who are eligible can't afford to take unpaid leave. As we reflect on 20 years of great success, let's recommit to improving this program going forward to help keep all Americans strong. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Monday, November 26, 2012, a great day for the residents of my town. New York City went 24 hours without a single person being injured or killed by gun violence. That day, the Brownsville section of Brooklyn and within my district, which has experienced more shooting victims last year than any other part of the city, saw a most-needed reprieve from the violence it experiences on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, women and children are gunned down every day in urban communities across the country by illegal handgun violence. In fact, on average, more than 100,000 people in the United States are shot and killed with a gun annually. This is endemic in communities of color where illegal handgun violence has become a very serious public health issue. These numbers are unacceptable, especially in a state and city with some of the strictest gun laws in the nation. Lastly, gun violence is not an inevitable problem, yet it continues to plague our communities. We owe it to the people we represent and to future generations to act with urgency and conviction to put an end to the senseless pattern of gun violence. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand with my colleagues today in Congress, the American people, and our President to say that now is the time to end the senseless gun violence that has plagued our neighborhoods from the streets of Compton and Chicago to the schools and movie theaters in Newtown and Aurora. Now is the time to pass legislation that is necessary to protect our children and our families from these repeated patterns of senseless gun violence. Our children should not have to live in fear while learning their ABCs or college algebra or innocently waiting at a bus stop after school or seeing a movie. I believe America is ready to take common sense steps to keep our families and our communities safe. Today, I call upon my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to move quickly and support President Obama's comprehensive gun violence prevention plan that calls for universal background checks and a ban on those military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that have no place in our neighborhoods. We must continue to take concrete steps towards keeping Americans safe. The time is now.
Gentlelady, the time has expired.
No time.
For purpose, the gentleman from Texas seek recognition. Without objection, the gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many details yet to define as we bring our laws in line with our values in the coming debate over immigration reform. But I caution my colleagues against using additional enforcement and security measures as a condition and a pretext to delay much-needed reform. While we should always seek to improve the security of this country in ways that are consistent with our Constitution, I remind my colleagues of our efforts and the cost borne by border communities as we've worked to secure the border in the years since 9/11. After we have spent billions on border walls, seen record-high deportations, and record-low immigrant apprehensions, endured endless lines at our international ports of entry that threaten to destroy our economy and our way of life, it is time to focus on immigration reform and secure legal flow of people and trade. The people of El Paso, Texas, a city of immigrants that was recently ranked as the safest in the United States, can tell you this: pass comprehensive immigration reform and you will have true border security. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to caution again about the dangers of sequestration. In a few short weeks, automatic across-the-board spending cuts will take place. If allowed, they could forestall our economic recovery. Not only will these cuts cripple many effective programs, but across-the-board cuts on top of already reductions will impact the Department of Defense. Yes, we need to make strategic budget reductions, eliminate or reduce ineffective programs and begin to bring our budget under control. But we need to do this in a responsible way. And automatic sequestration cuts are irresponsible. In my community, we will feel an immediate impact. If sequestration hits, programs that are essential to keeping our community safe and secure would face an automatic 8.2% cut. The COPS program in Sacramento would lose over $1.5 million in funding, which would hurt local law enforcement and impact our community's safety. Yes, we need to get our budget under control. We need to reduce our deficit and begin paying down our debt. But irresponsible across-the-budget board sequestration cuts are not the way to do it. I yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition? Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, America's manufacturing sector has played an invaluable role over the last century in propelling our economy and creating a strong and vibrant middle class. Manufacturing continues to be a bright spot in our economic recovery. Since 2010, the U.S. has added over 500,000 manufacturing jobs. That's progress. But in a time where millions of Americans continue to struggle, we can and must do more. Congress should be working every day to rebuild our economy and create good-paying jobs right here in America, not overseas. That's why I support the Make It in America agenda, which will strengthen manufacturing and rebuild our infrastructure. It will also maintain our nation's leadership in innovation and educate a 21st century workforce. The Make It in America agenda is a real jobs plan for this country. Democrats stand ready to act. Mr. Speaker, my constituents and all Americans cannot wait any longer. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair lays before the House of Communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on February 5th, 2013 at 10:58 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 227, Appointments, Commission on Long-Term Care. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 1 p.m. today.
And when the House returns in about a half an hour, they will begin